What's up again, everybody? Travis Fowler, Hark Rider, back with a new edition of Tights and Turnbuckles. So you know what time it is. Let's talk pro wrestling. And if you are new to this channel, welcome. If you're returning to this channel, I appreciate you coming back for more. To everybody, if you're watching this, make sure you have hit the subscribe button here on the YouTube channel and you give us a thumbs up while you're at it. It's totally free and doesn't take but just a couple seconds. And make sure you're following us on all of our social media pages, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok. We actually enjoy interacting with our fans on so many different platforms, so please feel free to reach out. I love talking pro wrestling, and that's what this podcast is about, talking pro wrestling. And last night, we had Backlash from St. Louis, Missouri, and overall, Backlash was actually a pretty fun show. I know some people are kind of down on the 5-card match layouts that we've had, or I should say 5-match card layouts. I'll get it right, and I think I got it on the second go around. But I gotta admit, I enjoyed the shorter cards. Either 5 to 6 matches, 7 I think is usually the golden number for myself personally. But I'd say between that 5 to 7 range is usually where you want to be for a good steady card. And honestly, the matches all delivered fine. The Fatal 4-Way that opened up was a hot opener, and please, for the love of God, I hope Drew McIntyre is okay. As it was reported, he completely missed the table with his head and smacked his head completely on concrete on that South of Heaven chokeslam from Damian Priest. So hopefully Drew is okay and he'll make a full recovery. Hopefully nothing severe took place from that headshot. Then the Becky Lynch, Lyra Valkyria match. I think it did exactly what it needed to do. Becky Lynch is still a good heel and establishing herself as having this chip on her shoulder by attacking Lyra after Lyra picked up the quick win. And when I mean quick, I'm not talking about the match, but the sudden win, I guess, the surprise win would be a better way to put that. Attacking her afterwards and continuing the heel heat was great from Becky, who's a total pro. By the way, some of the comments that she's been making about Bayley, I really think this is leading to a Bayley Lynch feud. No matter what anybody wants to say, I think it is going to be a fun feud when that does come to fruition with 2 of the original 4 horsewomen of NXT. And it sounds like they really are building up some kind of rivalry, especially with some of the comments that Lynch made in her Variety interview recently. But I look forward to seeing what they do moving forward with Lynch and Valkyria if they continue this program on TV. Then we saw the next matchup, which honestly surprised a lot of people when it came to Dominic Mysterio being as agile as he was and adding more moves to his arsenal. He held his own against Penta in a very good Intercontinental title match that saw him retain the IC title for the men's side. And then we had the grudge match, Pat McAfee versus Gunter, where at the very end, while Gunter may have picked up the win, even with the help of Michael Cole with Pat McAfee and a couple of spots where Cole decided to stick his nose in, Gunter still walked out with the W, but McAfee walked out with Gunther's respect, which I thought was a really cool thing. I'm surprised that they allowed him to do it. There wasn't like a handshake, it was more of like a hand gesture, being like, kudos to you for doing so well. I don't know if I necessarily like it as a whole when it comes to the ring general, since he's supposed to be this stoic type of wrestler, and having a guy like that show respect even to Pat McAfee, who everybody has respect for Pat McAfee and what he's done with his wrestling career to this point. But if you're trying to build Gunter up still as being a dominant heel, showing a face side with the respect nod may not have been the best way to do it. But we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe this will all end up looking better towards the end of whatever it is that we're going to with Gunter at this moment. Then the main event, which I have to say, I had to go back and rewatch because on a live watch, I was dealing with a child who wasn't in the best of moods, so I had to go back and rewatch it. And I gotta say, I agree with a lot of what people were talking about when I read some of the comments on social media last night, talking about how it was better than the Night 2 main event of Cody and Cena. Totally agree, actually. And a lot of it was because we saw Orton and Cena play their greatest hits. Like, they pretty much did all of their moves that we're known to see from them. You know, the sleeper hold spot where they kept trading off sleepers was new-ish to them, but we saw them do their greatest hits. You know, the shoulder tackle, five knuckle shuffle, the clotheslines that would then lead into a power slam, the RKOs and the AAs or FUs, however they want to call it at this moment. The crowd ate it up and they were into everything. Like, legitimately, St. Louis actually was a great representation for stateside audiences this go around, especially after we've seen what happens overseas. But Orton and Cena did their thing, and it worked out, I think, really well. The match actually was really good. You know, I'm not going to say it's a five-star classic. It just depends on what your taste for wrestling is. And for these two to be the veterans that they are, the established characters that they are, and to have the match that they did, if this is indeed the last time that we see Orton and Cena against each other, I have to say it was a great ender, honestly. I think it was well done by both guys. Like I said, may not be everybody's favorite matchup or classic matchup, but for what they were supposed to do, they did a solid job. Orton Cena, awesome. And I have to say, I like the R-Truth finish and the post conference. There we go. The post-show press conference. I must be fumbling over my words. It's been quite a week or so. But to have R-Truth come out and get AA'd, FU'd, again, whatever you want to call it, by Cena, which looks like it's going to set up a title match between Cena and R-Truth, which actually would be the second time that they've had a title match, the first one coming from Capital Punishment all the way back in 2011. This could be fun because Truth is obviously proven that he deserves at least a title shot. Is he going to win? Probably not. But it is going to be fun to see because Truth can hang and he can go with the best of them. So it'll be funny to see Truth taking on his childhood hero, John Cena. Looking forward to seeing when that comes about. Now, let's talk about some of the other stuff that went on Backlash, and specifically with that Fatal 4-Way in the U.S. title, because we saw a very interesting debut, that being one of the debuting Jeff Cobb. Jeff, who has made a name for himself in a couple of different promotions, primarily in New Japan, had his contract come up, and there had been rumors swirling that he was heading to WWE, actually bypassing AEW, even though we've seen him on AEW TV. From what some people close to him said, or at least according to news reports, so take it as a grain of salt, he felt like there was more of a challenge with WWE. He's kind of in the been there, done that phase with AEW. He knows the style, he knows some of his friends there, and he apparently wanted to take on a challenge. So he felt WWE was that challenge, and I hope nothing but the best. The guy is an incredible talent. If you've seen Lucha Underground at all, his work down there was absolutely amazing. He was under a mask, and I'm sorry, I cannot remember his name offhand. Coming to me right now is like, you know what? I'm not even going to pretend, because I was about to say a name that then occurred to me. It was an NXT name, so I don't want to butcher it, but he's over on Lucha Underground. Just go check him out. You could type in Jeff Cobb, Lucha Underground in your search engines, and something will pop up that shows what his character was. But basically, he was the younger brother of the owner of Lucha Underground in story, if you will, and he worked under a mask, looked like he kind of got broke out of a prison, and he was amazing. And if you've seen his work over in New Japan, you already know what I'm talking about. So I am very interested to see what they do with Cobb, to see what they're doing with Solo on top of it. I look forward to seeing how this plays out into this whole, I don't know, do we call them the Bloodline anymore? I really don't know. There's a whole lot of question marks on certain stories going on in WWE right now, but it all creates intrigue, in my opinion. There's always something to wonder about because we don't know what all this is supposed to lead to, but eventually I think it's going to lead to something where everybody's going to be satisfied. Some people believe in this story specifically, this will lead to the debut of Zilla Fatu coming to the aid of Jacob, and we'll eventually see Jacob and Zilla Fatu take on the team of Solo Sikoa and Jeff Cobb. We'll wait and see. I wouldn't be mad about it. Very intriguing prospect there. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens as this story continues to unfold. Another interesting name that has been swirling about the last couple of weeks that could be leaving AEW for WWE, one Mariah May. And if you're new to this channel, well, you're going to be very much acquainted with my fandom for Mariah May. I followed May all the way back when she was doing her independent run in the UK and then ventured over to Stardom in Japan. Had a little bit of a run there where I followed through her social media pages some of the stuff she did there. And then when she signed with AEW and doing this whole Tony Storm gimmick, the whole storyline and the Hollywood ending, I've gone on record saying that I believe that has been the best AEW feud of the last year and a half, arguably 2 years. It really would surprise me at this point if Mariah does leave AEW. And not because I don't think she would fit well in WWE. She's already gone on record saying WWE is her goal and that is where she's always wanted to work. So I could see it still happening, and I can see them making a huge offer, which according to some news outlets, they're planning to do so when her contract retires, wherever that may be. We have yet to see, but I do think she would be very successful over in WWE. I also think she would do fine. It's just staying in AEW, but we haven't seen her on AEW TV since that Hollywood ending, and it's kind of disappointing actually because she's one of those workers that I feel like is every bit worth her salt. So why we haven't seen her is anybody's guess, but I'm hoping that we see her eventually back on AEW TV, and if not, maybe we do see her in WWE sooner rather than later, but who knows. I think overall the women's locker room for both sides is actually very healthy, and I have to agree, by the way, with what Big E said about ageism when it comes to women's wrestling. If we've got a bunch of guys, Jeff Cobb included, by the way, who is 42, that are wrestling well into their 40s, some even close to the 50 bracket, a la our champion, John Cena, I really think the age thing needs to be dispelled when it comes to women because women, just like men, can compete up until they want to, up until they feel like they're done and their bodies are done and you want to go ahead and walk away right off into the sunset, go right ahead and keep on going. We've seen Trish come back and do matches. Lita's the same way. They've each had their own runs, and they definitely are, no offense to either lady, no spring chickens. So I think this whole age thing between men and women when it comes to professional wrestling needs to be put to bed. This, of course, all struck up during the releases that took place last week. Some were perceived as being lazy, some were being too old, and this was all from the women's side solely. Not to say that there weren't some men that hit those, but in this case, the women were factored in quite a bit. And I do think that is an argument that needs to stop. I think both the men and women add value no matter what age. As long as you can work and perform, go out and do your thing because you deserve to do so. And if you're good at what you do, the people will love it and deserve to watch what you do while you have your fun. Now, something I did want to mention about because it has made news. Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff are starting up a real wrestling company. Yes, I'm not talking about the quote fake stuff, our sports entertainment, our AEW, WWE wrestling. No, they are launching RAFW along with a very famous wrestling coach who goes by the nickname Izzy. I don't know his last name, but that is the nickname Izzy that he's given. Him along with Eric Bischoff and Hulk Hogan are launching the Real American Freestyle Wrestling Organization, and they set to kick off in August of this year. And this is supposed to be somewhat of a flash and flare to the actual amateur wrestling ranks. So much so the U.S. wrestling team has backed this venture. They're kind of looking to merge the WWE pageantry with the UFC realism. So we get Real American Freestyle Wrestling. It's supposed to bring all of the hoopla to real wrestling. And it'll be interesting to see if this works. I'm not one to shoot it down because, who knows? I don't think people saw UFC becoming a success. Hell, they were coming out of bankruptcy when the Fertitas brothers bought them out. And then later, Zuffa took over and we saw what happened with the UFC. And they've become one of the most popular sports in the entire world just in the last 20 years. So who's to say that this doesn't work? I'm not going to be one to say. I will look forward to seeing how this first show pulls off in August. Maybe it will be the next big thing. Who knows? It is interesting though, and to have Eric Bischoff, Hulk Hogan, and this world-renowned wrestling coach Izzy all coming together to create this, I think it does have a shot of being something that we need to keep our eyes on. But two interesting companies down south in Mexico have made news, each for various reasons. AAA, who just recently was announced to have been acquired by the WWE. We got some new details this week that there is a 51% stake share held by WWE, so they do have the ownership share to AAA's 49%. But this is supposed to be somewhat of a rejuvenation for AAA. They are hoping for better booking, and as most people would expect, some of their stars will have WWE contracts extensions added to their AAA contracts. Specifically, news making this week was Alberto Del Rio being, quote, signed to WWE. No, he is not signed to WWE, as it was later disputed back earlier this week. He actually is under contract with AAA, but because of the working relationship with WWE now, he probably will show up on WWE TV. But there is not a specific WWE contract, at least for now, for Alberto Del Rio. It's the same for 7 other stars who have apparently signed contracts that allow them to now also work in WWE through this AAA partnership. One, Vikingo, will be very interesting to see what we see him do eventually on WWE TV. As you've seen or heard about, I'm sure, at least a couple times, he's been on TNA Impact, he was on AEW, he's made his rounds to the independents, as well as made a name, obviously, down in Mexico as being the next great high flyer to the same degree as what Penta and Rey Fenix were looked at one time. It'll be very interesting to see Vikingo make his debut on WWE TV, whether it be through the AAA promotion or eventually a contract offered for him to be a star on the WWE roster. Very interesting times. I can't wait to see what happens there. But that left the question of, what about CMLL, the oldest wrestling company still in existence to this day? What does that make of them? They've had some success in their own right, especially with the partnerships with New Japan and AEW respectively. I don't see really anything changing with them, and they have even gone on record as to saying that their presentation of Lucha Libre is not changing. They feel like they've got it down flat. They don't have to worry about manipulating anything, and they're still going to bring the classic Lucha Libre style to the Mexico continent, whereas AAA may be adjusting for more of that WWE style type of at least presentation. I don't think you're going to see much of that from CMLL. They're going to be more of the gritty, let's just do the Lucha Libre style. Yes, they've got their pomp and pageantry, but it's a little different. So it'll be interesting to see how CML does going forward. Do they eventually change their tone a little bit? And if AAA does start becoming successful with WWE, will CMLL be able to match them? Or could we eventually see something similar to what Tony Khan can do with CMLL that we've seen with WWE do with AAA? Maybe he purchases CMLL. There's always the rumor going around right now that he, Tony Khan being he, has been trusted with the New Japan books. It'll be interesting to see what may transpire with CMLL, and do they eventually make a play to join Tony Khan in a partnership role similar to what we see with WWE and AAA now, which would be very interesting, especially if Tony Khan got the same type of percent ownage stake that WWE now does with AAA. But 2 more things before we get out of here. One, it's a fun little note because me personally, I have watched wrestling since 1994, and 10 years after that year was 2004 and my discovery of TNA Wrestling, which, by the way, they've been doing great work too. They recently just signed 2 knockouts as well, so I hope you're keeping up with them because they are trying to do big things, and according to Matt Hardy, they are very fiercely looking for a new TV deal that'll put them in more visible screens here in the stateside, which I really hope does come to fruition. I have enjoyed TNA's presentation over the last couple of years. I know they've had some instances that felt very rocky. They've had some personnel changes that have made people question what exactly is going on over there. But I think they're in the right direction. I think the partnership with WWE and the NXT brand has helped them very much so. And this is also another opportunity for TNA to do something with their Knockouts division, which they've always been at the forefront of women's wrestling since those early 2000s. But the reason I'm even bringing all this up and had a little segue over there was because this past week on AEW, there was a visitor backstage, and Jeff Jarrett was the first to put a picture up above him. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a rare time that you see him, and unfortunately, he is one of those what-ifs of professional wrestling. Arguably the greatest what-if of professional wrestling, that being the alpha male Monty Brown. Yeah, he was spotted at this week's AEW show. Man, I've always wondered what would have happened if this guy would have been given the rocket and been at least a champion in TNA, where he was one of the top guys for a couple of years. How he never got the TNA title is anybody's guess. Even Jeff Jarrett has gone on record as saying one of his big regrets, at least when it comes to booking TNA, was not making Monty Brown a champion at some point in time. I was very excited when he got signed with WWE. The name Marcus Corvon was kind of dumb, actually, but they still let him do the alpha male gimmick. He could talk, he could work, he had a great finisher with the pounce, which seriously, you could go back and watch just highlight reels of the pounce in both TNA and WWE. That thing looked fierce, and I really wish that man would have had a long, successful career. For those that don't know, he stepped away to help take care of some family members that needed it. So he walked away, even in the prime of his career, to do the right thing by his family. And you can't help but respect that man. Maybe one day we'll get a return match from the alpha male. But for now, this picture smiling next to Jeff Jarrett, I think is a great little, hey, I'm still here and doing well from the alpha male himself. And again, I'm hoping one day we do hear and see the pounce. Period. One more time. Now, on a little bit of a bummer note, this morning it was announced through several different outlets that the legendary homicidal, suicidal, genocidal, death-defying Sabu had passed away at the age of 60. I'm not going to sit here and say I was the biggest Sabu fan, but when I first laid eyes on him and his scarred up body, it was an unbelievable sight to see. And he was definitely one of the figureheads of the ECW brand in the 90s. And as I heard somebody else mention on something I watched earlier, literally any independent that he could have been on was headlined more than likely by Sabu in the 90s into the early 2000s. Sabu was one of the first big-time independent stars to come over stateside and make a huge name for himself. Of course, he had a great reputation over in Japan as well. The guy worked in so many different promotions, and just the ones that I saw were ECW, WCW, WWE, and TNA, as well as several others, and making appearances on other promotions like AEW as well. So it's definitely a sad time for the ECW faithful that grew up watching that brand. We've seen so many different ECW alumnus as well as wrestling fans and wrestlers send their heartfelt tributes out to the man. And Sabu, myself, with Tights and Turnbuckles, wish you nothing but peace in this afterlife. Thank you very much for all the memories, and I hope you're flying high, maybe even going through a barbed wire table or two up in that big match in the sky. Folks, that's going to do it for us this week. What are your favorite Sabu memories, if you have any, and what did you think of Backlash? What do you think of the AAA WWE partnership? Is it going to be successful? Sound off on all the topics that we talked about down in those comments below. Like I said at the beginning, it costs nothing for you to do this. Hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up while you're at it. And again, follow us on all of our social media pages. I'll come back again next week with a new TNT, but until then, I hope you have a great week ahead, and you all just continue to love pro wrestling.